So, good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order for April 16, the regular Police Commission meeting. Joe, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Nay.
No, sir.
No.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
Motion.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 19 regular Police Commission meeting?
Motion.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, first order of business is the action items. Chief, would you like to just give us a quick synopsis?
Deputy Chief's gonna handle this.
So this is for the approval to go before the board for the noise ordinance that we're trying to adopt. It's basically retooling 80-4 into prohibited noise, making it more clear, giving the officers responding to noise complaints a platform or some structure to work off of. As we discussed in the prior commission meetings, there was nothing. It was very, very vague. Actually, we didn't even, noise ordinance didn't even exist. So I know that this was sent out to all of you, and hopefully you had time to review. I know that Eric had sent some, Mr. Ranka had sent some comments back. If you look at the noise ordinance on page 3, I think most of those were answered. Questions, there were 3, 4, under 6 there. The questions were in red, and then we had our attorney answer those questions. I've read this over quite a few times. I don't have any problems with it, but whatever additions or deletions you want to make to it, I can do that and then have the attorney finalize it.
So the things in red were Eric's comments?
I believe so.
Are you satisfied with the responses?
Yeah.
The only one that I wanted to change was section E on page 4, subsection 3, where it's you said why not till 10. I have no problem during summer hours to change that till 10 o'clock. We can add that.
Anyone else here have any questions, Todd, or comments that you'd like to see changed?
I have a whole slew of them, honestly.
Did you write them down so we can look at them?
I have them in my head. To be honest, I'm not a fan of noise ordinances. Not necessarily, especially on Grosio, because I don't think we really have the traditional, kids driving through the neighborhood day and night with subwoofers and things like that.
We do occasionally.
I mean, I know we do occasionally, I don't think it's as prevalent here as other neighborhoods. I know, people down the street from me have friends that come and visit, and I hear them go by. But my biggest concern is just the language used that's very broad that says, just quote unquote to disturbance or disturbing. Eric brought up the issue of the four-wheeler, so long as it doesn't create a disturbance. I mean, what's the definition of really a disturbance and what's the meter of a disturbance. I know we've got the definition of, distracting or interrupting a reasonable person from, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, just the reasonable person standard of enjoying their, essentially the use of their property, I believe.
Yeah, the
Essentially,
tranquil, it
yeah.
used to
So,
explain in that manner.
and I know that's a general legal term. Those are just my initial thoughts, but
Well, I think as Todd indicated, this ordinance has been revised from the original one, which was very vague to give the police officers and the public a bit of discretion. And that's why it was made that way. I see it was tightened up, and I have to admit, Todd, I forget how or why we're redoing it. Was that?
We have a lot of citizen complaints, neighbor on neighbor, and we have nothing to write under.
So you're saying that
and it's not just that. I mean, when officers respond, they have to have something. There's not to say that, I mean, we're not going to be issuing a bunch of citations or tickets for this, but we have nothing to issue if there is a violation. We can tell them quiet down, then we're back there in a half an hour. Problem isn't resolved. This isn't the catch-all by any means. Like I said in the beginning, it's framework, and it's something to work off of.
And the other problem, Scott, is you get into the point where all the officers going to be carrying decibel meters and videos to record what the issue is in case there are any follow-up issues.
And I have no doubt discretion will be used at all times. Our officers are very, very good at that. This isn't, where if this gets passed, the amendment gets passed, we're going to be writing a bunch of noise violations. That's not what this is for.
But
It's
you're
just to
saying
clean up,
basically-
it's basically to add what we never had. And this is very similar to a lot of townships and cities across this area that have a noise ordinance.
Joe, you have any comments?
Well, yeah, what I like is, first off, I don't think that Doug and Todd and Kevin, if they thought there were some more issues in this, maybe it would be, going back to the drawing board and redoing some things. What I like about it, and Scott, I understand exactly what you're saying, because we try to make a balance out here. But because what I've noticed in the past, especially, and I'm going to say it with the Grosse Ile Police Department, I've noticed over the years that we give them tools, and for the most part, what I can see is the tools are used in an acceptable manner and in a correct manner. And if you need these tools, this was one area that we didn't have it. Now, I'll take some of that fault. I will. The last few years I was the chief, between the accreditation program and being the chief, there were some things I couldn't even get to. I didn't even have time to get to them because there was basically 2 full-time jobs. That's my fault, and I have to own that. And this was one that we changed back when I came on and kind of cleaned it up, and then it just, as you know, things happen. So I'll own that issue. And then finally now, these gentlemen coming in are starting to look at some things that had to be done that weren't. But it's just another tool. Because we have it doesn't mean it'll be used. It's not that kind of ordinance. It's kind of tough to explain if you haven't dealt in ordinances, but there are ordinances that are more prevalent and more to the fact, and it is there, and we have to use it. I mean, there are certain things like that, just like some laws. Some laws, we have a zero tolerance law from the prosecutor's office in certain areas. But I look at this as another tool, and if it's a step in the direction that these 3 gentlemen, and even I guess Pete's here now, and he's got to deal with it because it goes to Pete. And really these 2 guys aren't, or these 3 aren't going to deal with it. Pete's going to deal with it. So, no, but I mean, I'm just being honest, and that's who has to work with it. So I'm in favor of anything moving forward. And I read it. It appears on face value to be just another tool, but it's closer to what we have if we need something, because before it was very difficult. It was extremely difficult in all the different areas. But that's just what I want to say. And I think these three gentlemen are happy with what they saw, what we're reading, and I'm going to go with their recommendation too. And I know that before we did anything previous, and I know you're still doing it now, that the township, maybe not I'm not sure which attorney, if you actually used the prosecutor to look at it or Kristen looked at it, but I know somebody had to look at it before this was changed. So that's why I'd like to prove it.
Well, in defense of you, the commission supported what you did back then too. The commission agreed that what you submitted and we approved was adequate for the time. So, I just wanted to add that. Eric?
No, I understand the use of a tool and probably the requirement to have the tool. I just want to make sure that it's, allows normally permitted activities, right? Like the one I raised was duck hunting. That's outside of any hour in here, right? It's sun up to sundown. Sometimes that's, 5 in the morning. Sometimes that's 7 in the morning. So those types of activities I want to make sure are still allowed without having to cause an issue, right? Because that's a big one every fall that happens around here, right? Duck hunting starts and neighbors start complaining because they don't understand it. So to me, that's a big one. And then the 10 p.m., it's in the question, it's not in the new language, but I want to make sure that gets in the new language.
So you're satisfied with it now?
With those changes, yeah.
Yes.
The other issue I had is the current statute, or ordinance, not statute, the current ordinance is a misdemeanor, correct?
Yes.
I have a problem with the noise ordinance being a misdemeanor versus a civil infraction in and of itself.
Meaning?
I mean, it's criminal, to give somebody a misdemeanor for a noise ordinance. So if I decide to light off fireworks at one of my kids' birthdays outside of this, time frames when fireworks are permitted, I'm committing a misdemeanor. I don't even know what and I think that's what the current ordinance basically says already. But it's not,
What language would
I can
you?
tell you right now, I will not agree to.
What language would you support?
I would support
recommend?
if this was a civil infraction, first offense or second offense. Okay, third offense misdemeanor. Third offense, you got somebody who's just a jerk, for lack of better words. But to me, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. That's the problem I have with. I've had that problem with this ordinance before, but we've never really.
Well, so you want it treated like a municipal civil infraction? Is what
I would.
Yeah, that's
So-
the only other way. It's got to be a municipal civil
Right.
infraction.
See, this can go both ways. If I can use an example that we had, a big house party, they had a band. We issued as a municipal civil infraction. They thought it was great. They just kept playing. At some point, you don't have any bite. So it's a tool that can go either way. My point is you can take it one way with one way or the other way. The civil infraction,
How many
it's not a misdemeanor.
How many misdemeanor infractions have we written?
For noise, we haven't had as many because the ordinance has not been, we have, we don't want to get into it, but I think the three of us or the four of us can name several complaints we've had about noise and neighbor playing loud radios, barking dogs.
But that would be under the ordinance that we're proposing to replace, which also was a misdemeanor, correct?
That is correct.
It was.
Did we write misdemeanors on those instances you're talking? And you feel that if you didn't have that tool, it would have made the enforcement more difficult?
Every situation is going to be completely different based on
Well, I
maybe
know
us
that,
talking
but-
loudly in our backyard at a bonfire, which people, that's what I think that's what Michelle Longden is talking about versus having a raging kegger in your backyard. Those are two different spectrums of what can be used, so.
I have my house. We've got the 100-foot rule from the property line, right? If it can be heard past 100 feet, you can have a general conversation in my house, and everybody across the other side of the bay can hear me.
Well, we hear you all the time.
Exactly. So, I don't, in general, I am just not a fan of noise ordinances. I think part of that is because, to me, sometimes I also think people tend to abuse, not the police, but the neighbors tend to use it as abuse of anything.
Well, I know, I'm kind of Jimmy Crack Cornish on this. I mean, I've lived here most all my life and, was never a proponent of much in the way of those types of ordinances. And we've gotten along. So I don't have a problem one way or the others. But I think we ought to be together. Pete, what about you?
Well, when it comes to the penalty, just being a civil infraction, for us to be able to track that too, to say, we use our discretion, we write civil infraction on the first one, and then the second one, and then build it up to the same person. Tracking that can be difficult. If it's a misdemeanor, at least we can get it to court. A lot of times these things seem like they spin off of civil issues, civil complaints with each other. But if we have that tool, that we can at least write something, we can at least get it over to the prosecutor, we can get them to court, we can work out something that way. And usually, like the deputy chief said, it's gonna be a discretionary thing for the officer. And they're gonna know if they've been there multiple times or once or twice or whatever it is. They wanna issue that ticket, then let them issue that ticket. So, just my 2 cents.
So just from a question standpoint, right, because the language in here, right, says shall be a misdemeanor, right? Does that mean that the officer has to write it as a misdemeanor?
Yes.
Shall means
If he
yes.
writes it, it has to be a misdemeanor.
If he writes it, but does he have to write it? Like a neighbor says, hey,
No.
look,
No.
this, I read your ordinance and this violates it. You have to write this ticket.
No, you have discretion in the state of Michigan over misdemeanors. You have no discretion in felonies, but you have discretion over misdemeanors to write or not write.
That's just stipulating whether it's a civil infraction or a misdemeanor.
Well, how about if you said the language stated may be subject up to a misdemeanor, which would include a civil infraction as a discretion.
It has to be,
It's a misdemeanor no matter what, and then the
Yeah,
punishment
you
is
can't-
jail up to or a fine up to, or both is how the language.
So you're
reads for
saying you
misdemeanor.
can't write the language,
no, it has to be either or.
Either or, so we either have to have a
trying to give you a way out here, guy.
I know.
Give me some help. I mean, you're a lawyer, for God's sake.
Well, I mean, that's the problem, is the catch-22, right? So-
Well, I'm just,
And we don't have anything, we do have something for civil infractions that we can write or noise on?
If we adopted this, the language could be changed and we could do it, and I know Joe is very familiar with this. We could write it under a municipal civil, and that's 1, 2, and 3. Every time you're cited, the cost goes up.
The fine goes up,
Yes,
right.
correct.
And I mean, something like that, if we had something like that to where we've got that underlined first. And then.
It's either or. you
No,
know
and
that.
basically, well, can't we do both so that we have both options at the officer's discretion?
thought that's what I asked, and you told me I was
So you're
wrong.
saying
Well, in
you,
the language of
I
this,
know.
you can't do it as
I know.
both.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is, can you propose some language that Todd will agree to, that'll get us what we all want?
so it sounds like I'm going back to the drawing board on this.
Sorry.
Well,
No, it's all right. I just,
Todd, you could've
I want
said-
everybody in agreement, and before this goes to the board, I know the chief had gave a really, really good example of why it's a misdemeanor. It has to have a little bit of,
It's gotta be more authority because the people just, okay, fine, I'll pay you
right,
$250.
and
fine and-
everybody in this room has been to a house 3 or 4 times on a noise complaint.
Or you wanna
We've
throw
all
them
done
in
it,
jail, I
and
know.
by the time the 4th time, you're like, well, what are we gonna do now? Right? And
Can I
it's
just-
not, it's
oh,
not
I'm sorry.
fair, no, it's not fair to the neighbors, it's not fair to, the
Now, as far
neighborhood.
as making you go back to the drawing board.
And then the police are showing up, and they're supposed to, they're there for keeping the peace, and we have no, ability to,
No tools
like it
in your
goes back to that
toolbox.
framework or the,
Yeah.
anything to work with.
Todd, if I just may add,
Mhm.
and I know this isn't like splitting the baby, but in forget the last 3 years, that doesn't count. You've been the chief for how long? Okay, so say 2 years. And we've had how many, do you think, noise tickets written? Yeah.
There was one area on the island within the last few years that we wrote, probably 3 or 4 that I know of just there for neighbor disputes.
3 or more. Okay, in 9.5 years as chief, we wrote 2 for issues that continued. And all I'm saying is I really trust the people that are on the road, and maybe even if it has to go through the warrant rec, which the process of warrant rec is not real feasible, but so you have, say, 3, I have 2, and together we've been the chief for 11.5 years, maybe 12 years. So all I'm saying is this isn't something that Grosse Ile is really hammering people on, because I can promise you in 9.5 years, we had hundreds of noise complaints. I promise you that were resolved in that many years. And I promise you guys, and you probably, Pete, haven't seen 25 or 30 of them in the last couple of years that didn't get to you. Just because you're in the DB, I mean. You know what I'm saying? So they don't get to you because you don't see the ticket or even a complaint to make a warrant rec or whatever. So that's all. I'm not saying, Scott, that it's not going to happen, but I'm not sure, because this is an oversight committee. If we felt that the Grosse Ile Police Department was out there sitting at a stop sign at the north end of the island generating business for the court, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say something. I promise you I'm going to say something. So the idea is I don't think these gentlemen and ladies that we have will abuse this, because they haven't shown to abuse other things. And if anything, I mean, this is the truth. You guys, and I like the idea of all the verbal warnings. You guys are lighter, and that's the way you want to run that department. That's a wonderful thing. I have no issue with that. And so we do know that our warnings are much greater than our citations. So I'm just saying I have confidence that giving you this tool, it won't be abused. And if something is abused, again, Doug, I rattle your ear every Monday anyway. So
Most times when these officers come come to one of these things, to an incident, like I think Todd was saying, it's just not they show up and go, here's your ticket, and leave. They talk with the residents, they talk with the complainants, they try to mediate, and most always there's a resolution verbally between all parties and they're all happy. When these tickets are written, like I know the one that we were just talking about here, that gentleman was pushing the envelope as hard as he could for multiple weeks while against the neighbor. The neighbor finally had it. So we were unable to, that's an example.
that's the example, and that's why.
That's a good example, but them going to his house for a bonfire and people talking, they'll quiet down. Hey, it's past 10 o'clock, it's past 11 o'clock, it's 5 in the afternoon. That's kind of a little bit different, isn't it? Than 1 o'clock in the morning.
And that's the
These
reason.
these are conversations that officers will have with these residents. Can't speak for every officer, but that's kind of what I think happens statewide with these type of incidents.
That is exactly what I'm talking about. Between the two of us, I know we've had hundreds of noise complaints, hundreds. I've had hundreds myself, not that I responded to, but as the chief. So, and those 2 were 2 that, here's how it has to be. There was no choice. Yes, we did have a choice. Our choice was to write the ticket because of all the other issues that you've caused in this neighborhood. So that's the problem. So that's why I just think that if we saw abuse, Paul, we can always come back. We can bring it up. I mean, we bring up everything else in this. This is basically how we oversee the police department. If we saw any kind of abuse in any area, we would bring it up. Is that fair? It can always come back.
I understand where you're coming from. I also understand the frustration of an officer when he doesn't have a hammer he can bring down where it's needed. But I also hate to see an ordinance put in place for a very few people or even one individual so that everybody could conceivably pay the price for it at some point in time because it's there once it's there. Scott, what do you want to do? Either support or either make a motion or give us the way you'd like it written and we'll vote that.
I would like to fine tune some more of the language, you know, like Eric brought up, the operating of machinery, things of that nature. You know, we're talking about machinery, or we're talking about backhoes, things like that, you know, I mean, that's very broad.
How descriptive do you want it?
I was going to say, that one I thought was settled.
And the reason I say that is that could be applied to a lawnmower at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
I mean, the only reason I wasn't too against the phrasing there is, right, is it's operating machinery so as to create a noise disturbance, like not just operating it, but operating it like intentionally to cause, and like, hey, my neighbor hates when I run the lawnmower, so I'm just going to put it on the property line and let it run all day. That's how I read this, right?
And that happens.
That's one of the incidences we've had.
Yeah, so it's not like, it's not just the act of using a device, it's the act of doing it purposely to cause a disturbance, right? I'm not a lawyer, I'm just an engineer.
No, and I mean, for every argument on one side, there's an argument on the other side,
Yes.
right?
Scott, make a motion.
Put on Scott.
Make a motion, Scott, because I hate to say this, I'll probably support it.
I mean, I guess my motion would be, I would like to go back to the drawing board on some of the language. I am concerned about, you know, the
Well,
problem is, at the same time, we don't have,
If that's the case, are you willing to work with Todd to get the language the way you see it?
of course, obviously, yeah, anytime. It's just a matter of, at the same time, we don't have tools to necessarily do what, we don't have decibel meters, you know, like DNR does for noise, you know, for checking decibels on machinery, things like that.
I don't think we want to go to that detail, though.
No, not at all. I'm just saying,
Because then are your DB meters certified, calibrated? Were you close enough, too far away?
Hey Scott, on page 3, this is where Eric was talking about. And number 6, operating any machinery, equipment, mechanical device so as to create a noise disturbance. You don't need a decimeter to know that you've been running a lawnmower for an hour and a half next to my window because we have 6 feet between our yards. You don't need a decimeter for that. That's what, but people talking, you're going to hear people across yards, and that's where you have to have officer discretion. I don't think we can pinpoint every single parameter of every noise and distance and time of day and even time in season. Because look at boats in the water. Noise carries from those. How many times from where you guys live you've heard the cross dikes
I mean,
or Sugar Island?
that's all I hear all summer long if I'm home.
That's over 100 feet. You gotta use some. You have to be able to use judgment to dictate what's going on versus a hammer. Right. The way that's written, just on the equipment, I actually agree with Eric what he was saying about how that's written. It gives you're mowing your grass. You're mowing your grass. It takes, like, I mowed mine yesterday. It took an hour. I didn't do it at 10 o'clock at night though.
What if we reviewed this in 6 months, went ahead and passed it? Would you be
So-
comfortable with that or no,
Well,
Scott?
no, and I didn't realize this before, is that this is under the disorderly conduct category, chapter 80 for this, I realized it was chapter 80, but I didn't realize. So, when we're talking disorderly conduct, that raises it to a different level of being a jerk.
Which is probably why they made it
So-
misdemeanor.
All right, I will.
I'm open to whatever.
No, it's,
Don't feel any pressure, Scott.
If you look at page
We're
2,
just trying to help you.
hey, Scott, look at page 2, plainly audible and sound. When you read those two definitions, it does give a little bit
Right.
more understanding too. I know it talks about the 100 feet, but it defines in a sense where we can actually use that versus what a clear definition of what can be, it's a broad definition, but it does give the generated electronically, voice, music, acoustic guitars, whatever. Then you look at B after that.
Right.
That's where the discretion comes in and working it out.
All right, I will motion to adopt this for.
Second.
Motion.
Sorry.
Motion to adopt the proposed ordinance for being presented to the board.
Second.
So just a couple friendly amendments. So one, I mean, we talked about it, but it's not specifically in this language right now. So in E3, unamplified human voices should be 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Is that
Where are you at?
page 4, E3? So rather than 9 at 10 p.m.
Yep, I can change that.
and 7 a.m.
So the motion is to adopt the ordinance submitted with the amendments indicated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good with that.
You good with that, Jessica?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Thank you, Scott.
If I stood up here long enough.
I mean, you know, we are relying on our good officers' discretions, right? So.
Yeah.
And that's the most important
That's
thing.
really what
And Joe had touched on that. That's the most important thing to know. I mean, everybody, I know all of our men and women in the department, and discretion is always used. No one's walking out to any type of these complaints and right out of the gate taking action with writing citations.
Right.
It's usually a repeat return, you know, where something's not being.
And it's never our officers that I ever have concern about. It's the complaining neighbor who hates the other neighbor.
And there's
and
discretion
complain.
used with that, and there's, you know, I'm not worried about that at all.
Well, as I indicated, I didn't have a problem with the vagueness of the first one, just so that the officers had full discretion. But by the same token, if the officers are what drove this, then obviously they felt they needed a little more oomph in their toolbox. So I'm glad that we talked this out and came to such a unanimous decision.
If you look at the monthly stats, I don't want
It's
to steal.
exactly what I was just going to do, right?
You got 22 citations written for March and 154 verbal warnings.
But I'm not.
Yeah, yeah.
We're proving it on month after month, year after year. So
Yeah, it's always far and away, the verbal warnings is far and away always the highest stat on the page.
Which one are you talking about?
Monthly statistics, verbal
Oh,
warning.
yeah.
I mean, and notice to appear in verbal warning, right? Hey, fix the problem before I have to, you know, issue a corrective action.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Sorry that took 35 minutes, Todd.
All right.
He's not sorry.
Good time.
Let me put that on the record.
I'll just stay up here then.
Todd, that's it. You don't do the rest of your report.
Okay, moving right along, we have a presentation.
Thank you.
You want me to did you get that going?
No, I think I got it going here.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson and members of the Police Commission. Here tonight to talk to you about the deer call and what we did for the 2024 season. Right now, the deer call is over with. Oops, let me get to a So right now, the deer call is over with for the 2024 season. Before I get into the numbers of this year, just wanted to recap the last 5 years on kind of where we kind of started when I kind of started doing some of this stuff, and then how we ended up to where we are now. So back in 2022, that year we were unable to get an aerial done. Weather was just too bad. We just couldn't do it, but we were able to harvest 110 deer that year. And we estimated at that time there was about 400 to 500 deer on the island. That year, all the deer was donated to the City Lights food pantry. And we spent a little over $16,000 doing the deer call that year. 2021 was our big year. Mike Drecky and I spent over an hour in the helicopter doing an aerial. We did the aerial in the middle of the deer call. So we estimated, after we had taken 157, we estimated there's about 400 deer on the island. We took an additional 43 out of that number. And then that year we also did a September call as well. So that took us to 275 we did that 1 year in 2021, which gave us an estimate of about 282 deer on the island. That year, we partnered up with Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger, and we were able to donate almost 10,000 pounds of venison to local food banks, and a lot of those were downriver as well. $17,000 was paid for by Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger for all the processing, and that year we did spend around a little over $36,000 in doing the deer call. 2022, I think that was the last time I was up here when I gave this presentation. We estimated we were able to do a aerial count, and we estimated around 300 deer. We were able to take 172 out that year, which dropped us down to about 128 deer, which we estimated to be on the island at that time. We also were able to donate over 4,500 pounds of venison to these local food banks. Some of them were downriver. Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger donated, or they picked up the tab for $7,900, and then we spent about $20,000 that year on the deer call. So 2023, which was last year, we were able to get an aerial count first thing. We estimated there's about 200 deer. We harvested 65, brought us down to about 135, donated a little over 2,000 pounds. Again, Sportsmen for Hunger picked up the processing bill on that, and then we spent about $8,300 for the call that year. And then the big year this year, 2024, we estimated there was about 200 deer on the island. We harvested 52. We finally did an aerial, which after the deer call was done, we were able to count about 140 deer left on the island. So we almost donated 1,000 pounds to the local food banks again. And again, we spent about $10,000 this year on the deer call. So you can see from 20, 21, 22, now we've gotten to that point to where we're really just starting to manage the herd and only having to take between 50 and 100 deer. DNR has been great to work with lately, and whatever we've asked them for, they've been, hey, if you need more tags, let us know. They'll get them. So they've been really good about it this year. I think this is also a good slide to show here. Our traffic crashes. 2019 we had 37. In 20 we had 24. So now 2022, 23, we've had 9, and we're on track this year to kind of stay in that single digit number, which I'm hoping that we can do. So that's one of the big takeaways too, of knocking out that many deer over the years. We've gotten it down to where our traffic crashes are very light. I do ask the officers if there is an encounter we have a deer that is injured in someone's backyard. Sometimes they get hung up on maybe someone's fence, or they were just injured somehow, some way. Maybe a car did hit them, was never reported. Usually they give me those little reports, and I try and keep track of those, and we lose between 10 and 20 deer that way a year from just things that happen without either the deer call or traffic crashes or whatever it is. So just to give you a number in the back of your head, that we do lose some deer that way. This year we did have some evidence of people poaching, so that's another big thing that we've been keeping our eye on too. So there's just a handful of those. I'm not going to get into all those because we're still looking at a few of those things. Again, Michigan Sportsmen for Hunger, we've partnered with them. Dean Hall, who was the director of it, has been a huge help in helping us get the venison to the processor, get everything taken care of, and then finding these local food banks. He's been amazing on getting all this stuff taken care of for us, because it would just be a huge burden on our end of doing all that stuff. So he's been instrumental and huge in helping us, and he's been giving us pointers and some helpful hints on some things with other places that have done deer calls, with the metro parks, with Ann Arbor, and all those other places where he's helped out do some of those things. So he's been a huge help. So in conclusion, past 5 years, we've harvested 674 deer while utilizing 3 to 4 officers. One of them has been a volunteer. We've donated over 17,000 pounds of venison to help countless families. Car versus deer crashes have been dramatically decreased. Last 5 years, the health of the herd has been improved. We haven't seen that many injuries, so that's been improving as well. Hopefully, the program continues next year. We'll harvest again between 50 to 100, while maintaining the herd between 80 and 130. We're at 140 right now, so I think we're in that good range of just having to take a few and not kill ourselves out there doing it either. So. Proven methods have been successful in reducing the herd and keeping our costs at a minimum. I do want to thank Lieutenant Doyle, Sergeant Vasquez, Officer Canterbury, and Detective Secretaries who helped me out this year also. Those guys have been great. They've been amazing helping out. They know exactly what they need to do. Don't have to babysit them. When something needs to get done, it's already done. So I've got a great team of guys who have been helping me do this, and it's been working flawlessly. So I think we got a good program going, and I want to just thank those guys as well. So there you go, deer call.
I'd like to thank you. I know you've put a lot of effort into this, and the data shows it's been well worth it.
Pete, can you go back to the crashes?
Yes.
You guys see in 2021 how it drops right off? That was the year that they had the double call.
Yeah, we did 200 in the like early year, which was probably February, March-ish, and then September we did the 75. So that's kind of where that big year hit. So again, that's where everything kind of changed, where we can just kind of maintain everything.
Hate to bring it back up, bad memories, maybe 2019, we didn't have one. So
Right.
That's
Yep.
those big numbers. It wasn't
That was-
at the police department.
Yep. Yes.
You guys aren't responsible for that number.
Their team they're dedicated to come in, like Pete said. They're up and going in the morning. They're doing their business, and you can see the results.
It's working.
And
Oh, it's
you're
working.
saving taxpayers on the damage of their vehicles. It's safer for the community.
I mean,
There you
from my-
have it.
From my standpoint, the numbers are phenomenal, right? I mean, it's incredible what you guys have done. It's hard work, right? I mean,
is.
this is not hunting. This is
It's
this
not
is
hunting.
physically
It's not deer
hard
camp.
work. That's draining physically and mentally. So I get that. I understand it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a little bit sad that you have to have calls because there's no hunting allowed. But when you ban hunting, then these are the types of things that you have to do to maintain the herd. It's my
Yes.
only social comment for the
It
night.
is.
Do you know, my memory way back when, Joey, was the DNR said the optimum number was at 69 or 99?
66 deer for the square miles of what would you call the main island? Because you know how they
Yeah.
count all the out islands for square miles.
Yep.
And they came up with like 66. They told me.
Yeah.
So that number, I've done some research on this too. I talked to Chad Stewart, who is the head biologist for all deer and elk in the state of Michigan. I've spoken with him several times and asked him questions like that. How many deer should we have per mile, square mile, whatever? And they won't give us a number. They said basically it's kind of a community thing on what they feel is the safest for them, what we feel is the right number. They kind of leave it up to us now.
That's
But
it.
years
So-
ago, they had a number.
Yeah.
Well, they did. A biologist gave it to us because of what they said
Yep.
was, first they take what your area is made of,
Yep.
meaning geographical area,
Yep.
like is it all
Residential. or whatever,
buildings?
yep. Yeah.
You know, like
Yep.
in the city of Detroit, 10 square miles, you
Yeah.
can't have 3 deer.
Good luck.
But,
Yeah.
right, so the point is, because have a lot of woods, a lot of area, but it was 66. But
Yeah.
anyway, I have a couple of, anybody,
Just one,
Yes.
have we cleared the airport of deer, or there's
So
still
the
smaller?
airport is a year-round thing that we can do.
Yeah.
I just have to get the tags from the airport manager. So we can, if there's usually I get a call, and saying, hey, we're seeing a lot of them down here again, and I'll try and grab a couple of the guys and go down there. And
you have to
see
keep
what we
those
can-
pilots safe. I mean, coming in and going out. And
Oh, yeah.
There's a zero tolerance. That's what we talked about before, about ordinances
Yeah.
and things like that.
Nope,
The airport's a
absolutely.
zero tolerance with deer, and it has to be, because of the lives of the pilots.
Oh,
Yep.
one time I landed here, flying to, coming in, I'm going, there's no way. Yeah, after that.
Mhm. Yeah, so we do try to take, do what we can for the airport and help them out as much as we can, so,
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
yes.
A question just on some of the numbers. Before the group that helped you pay for it, Pete,
Yes,
say, just take any year, and that's that City Lights.
yes,
When you have the number that you put down there that say they gave 10,000 that year,
oh, right here, for
yeah,
the processing,
yeah, any number,
Yeah.
any process number.
yep,
Is that minus, is your total cost after that is pulled from it? Or that is given and then our total cost is added to that?
no, our total cost is $36,000 that year,
Right.
and that number that's not included in any of those numbers.
They don't,
No.
okay, I see.
No.
And can you also tell me, on the 36, what does that include? And if I was buying $36,000 worth of your,
So that year was
Program.
our expensive year where we did 275. So a lot of that was probably getting more equipment. Probably a lot of it was manpower, spending that much time to get 275. That's where the majority of that number came from. So that was our big year. Like I said, we're pretty conscious of that as well. So we're down this last year. We were down to 10,
right, I saw
and
that.
eight the
Yeah.
year before. So
The number is what it
number,
is. I
yeah.
just wanted to know what
Yeah,
you're.
the majority of that is going to be personnel and overtime. So that's what that number is going to be.
So it's everything,
Yep.
anything you can think of that went to the deer culling program
Yes.
is in that number.
Yep. Whether it's
That's what I-
equipment,
okay.
what ammunition,
Anything.
firearms.
Yeah.
That year, I believe we also acquired a few technology things too that helped us out. I don't want to touch too much on that, but I will say that we have the capability of thermal, which has been huge in not only safety but recovery as well. So safety is our biggest concern when we're out there. If it's not worth anything, a deer isn't worth anything. The shot isn't, we don't need to take it. We're not going to take it. We'll just move on. They'll be there another day. So patience, takes a big spot in that as well. And then just real quick to touch back on the Michigan Sportsmen Against Hunger again too. So I forgot to try to plug them a little bit, but whenever you buy a hunting license, because they've been so great to us, and it goes for such a great cause. Whenever you buy a hunting license, you're asking if you want to make a donation of $5, whatever you want to do. So every year I usually try to chip in a little bit too, because it goes to help programs like ours and other programs throughout the state where it ends up just helping families at the end of the day, and that's really what it's about. So
Well, congratulations to all of you. Tell them.
thank you very much.
Tell all the team.
I will
that we
for sure. Thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much. Okay, there you go.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We bait, don't
Oh.
we, to draw them into certain areas, or?
Those are some top secret.
Those are CIA.
The
need to know basis.
DNR gives us guidelines that we can follow, and some of that is in there, and they do allow us to do certain things, so we got to follow their guidelines. So, yep. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Let me close that.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
All right, Chief, who's up next?
Very quick. So a couple things for department update. You guys have your joint study session on the 22nd. But we have that upcoming millage in August. And the police commission and the board are gonna work together to try to push that through. Officer Nate White, we have him on the township board agenda for April 22nd, so a week from yesterday, for the vote for the hire. So I've spoken to him and he's still on board. Still good for that. Todd has been working a lot of time on the Axon project for our body cams and car cameras. It's a little delayed, not on our side, just on the shipping. So a way to put just on the shipping and some of the programming, we're creating a new program, right, bringing it into the department. So it's new kind of infrastructure. We have to adapt to it. And then small things, we just learned today that our computers for our fleet had about a year left, and then they're going to be obsolete. That's another thing that is kind of another kick. We have to try to fix it out. And then we've already worked on the printers, radars, and we're continuing to repair the building. Trying to find money for that. So that's all I got.
Anyone have any questions for the chief?
No, sir.
Scott, we'll do anything that you ask.
Okay, for the monthly stats, did anybody have any questions? I know we kind of briefly touched on some of the numbers there. I'll just briefly go over some of the high points. The verbal warnings for the month were incredible at 154. Again, that's into educating the public. I think that's way more important than citation writing. The reserve report, any questions on that? Okay. And then one other thing that I wanted to touch on was the DB report that Detective Darzniak had prepared. Detective Darzniak and Detective Seconteris did an excellent job on this. There was a larceny of firearms, and on March 10th of 24, a Grosvenor resident came to the station to report that there were 2 handguns stolen from the residence. Case was turned over to the Detective Bureau for follow-up. Detectives were able to identify a suspect. He was an 18-year-old out of Sumter Township. They recovered him, or actually the detectives recovered the firearms and arrested the 18-year-old. Suspect was charged with 2 counts of possessing an unregistered firearm. I was very involved as I knew what was going on at the time, and they did an exceptional job. Quick amount of time, recovered the guns, and I was very pleased. There was a lot of social media that was involved in it. There were some threats made, and they were able to really act quickly on that. And the way I feel about it is probably stopped something that potentially could have been worse by getting those guns recovered and off the street. So very happy with that outcome. And then the juvenile report, there were 5 juvenile complaints. Several are still under investigation, CPS involvement. Detective Bureau worked closely with the schools regarding some of those investigations, and the appropriate actions have been taken. In addition, Alice evacuation drill was conducted at Meridian. Staff and students did an excellent job of conducting the drill, and protocols were followed. So that continuing the drills at the school, all the schools seem to be, and I know Pete can help me with that, the schools are doing an exceptional job when the drills are being conducted. And that's all I have. Any questions for me?
Oh, you know, the school has a new safety coordinator and liaison that's helping out a lot. I'm not sure if you knew that.
I heard he's a pain. Have you dealt with him yet?
I have no idea who he is.
Okay.
Don't want to.
You're on the air, lawyer. I mean, sir.
No,
He's sitting
yes,
next
they're
to
doing,
me.
and you know, because I know you're very connected. You understand, but we're very happy with the schools involved. You know, I know Pete does a good job
So
setting
now
up
you got to
the
deal
drills.
with me more. Not something you want to do.
No, you have to deal with Pete.
You.
So, all right.
Eric, anything?
No. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Liaison report.
Well, Doug beat me to everything, so I thought that was me standing up there, but he's a lot taller, so it was a little different. So I'm done. Doug said it all. That's what I was going to bring up. Some of those issues that we were going to have, the meetings, the hire, and we're moving forward.
Very good. Eric,
Yeah, no,
any
that's
questions?
what I wanted to talk for the liaison report. So the 22nd is the next board meeting, and we've got a joint police commission and township board study session.
It'll be correct.
It'll be-
6:30.
It'll be
I was
before
gonna
the
say
board
6:30.
meeting so that we can, before the board meeting so we can identify what the right next step is for the millage.
Correct. And the hire is right at that meeting. The action item will be at that meeting
Okay.
for the new hire.
For the new hire and then for the millage renewal, which is now likely.
And I don't see a problem with the millage renewal on the action item. They put it on there. I don't foresee us in the study session, anything going awry. You know, we're going to give our proposal to the board and then any questions, obviously, or anything to say. So yes, I think should be smooth.
Scott, you have anything?
I've exhausted all of my words
I
tonight.
know that's not possible, but thank you. Okay, moving on to public comment. There being no public in attendance, Kevin, Todd? Any comments? Doug? Jessica? Can I have a motion to approve the monthly reports?
So
Motion.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That concludes our